on off. Over the many years of teaching, you have a group of students who sits, for example, over there, and oftentimes they're very quiet. They think, they pay attention, but they rarely ask questions. So when I first come to class and say, do you guys have any questions? I don't look that direction, because the past like 5 or 10 weeks, those weeks have revealed to me that those people don't usually ask questions. So I don't even bother. Then that place over there in that corner, I have a group of students who just fall asleep or they're on their cell phone. So I don't really look at their direction either. Then there is that particular location in the class where you have students who, because of life circumstances, are very hostile, they're very angry. And so it doesn't matter what I say, they are very selective. They gravitate towards certain words, certain statements that could rile them up. And so they could raise their hand and throw a fit. So I don't really look at their direction either. And we're just talking about a classroom of maybe 20 or 30 people. And within that 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, the classroom itself has been divided into 5 or 6 or 7 different groups. And 5 out of the 7 groups that I have created because of experience, I just pay no attention to. I only deal with the 2 groups of people. And each group may have, 2 people, maybe 3 people, maybe 1 person. And society is very much the same way. That people, because of their various temperaments, because of their various histories, and remember, history creates its own unique set of emotions. History also creates its own set of language, words, vocabularies with which you communicate and express and share your ideas. You also have the biological factor. There are people who are unattractive. There are people who are attractive. There are people who are talented. There are those who are not talented. And we gravitate towards the people that look like us, taste like us, feel like us. And that's just very, very normal. Now, if you want to, for example, ask, why is there such injustice and how can we overcome such an injustice? That is a very, very complicated place to be. There is really no, I think, one single answer. I've had a friend who has been, she was born in Eritrea. At the age of 3, she was taken through Sudan, and it was a warring country. And then she was brought to America. Okay. Now, if you happen to have lived in that particular part of the world, poverty, war, violence, it has been part of your psychological narrative for a long, long, long time. Your father is rarely home because he's out there 24/7 making, money to send to you guys to have some food and clothing and shelter. So you don't have these questions such as, where is my father? He's never home. Or why does my mother spank me every time I do something wrong? It's just part of the culture, People don't have patience for nonsense. If you're only given bread, for example, you don't say, where's the cream cheese? You don't ask those questions, because nobody has cream cheese. So you're content, satisfied with just having bread. Then she came to America and she found herself in California and she found herself in Oakland. And after a while, at the age of 11 or 12, she decides to move to a different state. Now, as you can tell, Oakland is pretty diverse. You have a good number of Asians and African Americans and Africans and Middle Easterners. But she chose to go to a place in the country where it wasn't very diverse. It was populated by mostly Caucasians. And when she started going to school there, her instructors asked her, "So, Julian, are you doing okay?" Her instructors began to ask her, "So, what's your story? Where are you from?" And she began to tell, her instructors and her friends her story, which was, "Yeah, I was born in Eritrea. My parents, by force took me through Sudan. I saw a lot of dead people, had to do this, had to do that, then we came to America and, all that stuff." Now, that's a very uncommon narrative for Caucasians, especially if you happen to have lived in a relative, position of privilege. And so because of the way this culture is and because of the way things are interpreted, after hearing her story, they told her that her parents have been abusive, that they should have never taken her through Sudan, a warring zone, and it's a sign that her parents don't love her, don't care for her, all that stuff. She was fine up to the age like 13 or 14. And then what began to happen, her instructors, one after the other, kept telling her that her parents mistreated her. Now, when you're given a narrative, you're given a merchandise. Now, depending on what sort of a customer you are, how you're listening, how you're hearing things, you either take it in and it becomes part of your DNA slowly, or you reject it. She was a customer who accepted the stories. At the age of 16, she truly believed that her parents mistreated her, and she got slowly depressed. She's been on various kinds of medication for the past 30 years, and she's tried to get herself out, but she can't, because when you get depressed, it's not just the depression, you're also going to cultivate some habits, because all of your stories are about being misused, being mistreated, being unloved, being uncared for. You're not going to talk to people who have had good parents, who have had good experiences of love. So what you're going to do is you're going to find your own group of people who have been shattered very much like you, or they have purchased narratives that eventually break them. And you realize after a while that it doesn't need Trump, it doesn't need anybody to come down here and create division amongst people. Life gives all of us different events. You're born in Saudi Arabia, you become a Muslim. You're born in Utah, you become a Christian. You're born in India, you become a Hindu or a Buddhist. And all of a sudden you realize that the culture itself sells you things or gives you things. And then everybody, because of temperament, because of social circumstances, they begin to impose meaning on those events. And then what's going to happen is, look, she's not going to talk about her episode to this class for too long, about how she went back home to visit her grandmother, how she got stuck at the border. It's a good gossip for this class. But because she's smart, because she's insightful, because she's wise, she looks at the classroom, she looks at our ears and our body language, she says, okay, it's a good story, but they're not really paying too much attention. They don't really care. So she stops. And what she does when she goes home, she's going to pick up the phone and call her relatives in Mexico to tell them that she's okay, that all the difficulties she encountered at the border. Why? Because her people understand her language, her experience, the events, and how those events create certain set of emotions. And all of a sudden you realize she, because of her own insights, intuition, instinctual patterns, she knows that this is not the best community to share that experience. And the bigger the society, the more varied the experience, or the more bigger the buffet with different kinds of foods, you have different people gravitating towards different things. And all of a sudden you have all these different groups. It's very, very, very normal. Now, if your question is, why is this particular group want to impose itself onto this other group, that also is not very difficult to respond to. We are the sort of creatures who enjoy domination. We enjoy aggression. We have been kind of violent animals for many, many thousands of years. It's only through religion, it's only through politics and governments and literature, that we have been tamed a little bit. So what usually happens is, I suppose prior to the invention of the spoken word, i.e. language, if I didn't like you, I would grunt and groan and make some facial expressions, and I would wait to get a reply from you that would be kind, understanding. I don't know how that would work before, language. If I was not satisfied, I would just come over and beat the crap out of you. Okay. Today, the story is very different. If there is a disagreement between you and I will sit. We'll talk. Maybe we'll go seek therapy together. Maybe we'll go talk to the dean. We'll do all sorts of things. There'll come a point after doing this in a variety of different shapes and forms, there comes a point where your emotions are no longer contained. My emotions are no longer contained or containable. And all of a sudden we become physical. There is also the element of greed. Hello, Lena. If, for example, you say you're a Hindu and I'm an avid Buddhist, I will try to prove to you that the Buddha said Hinduism is wrong. I mean, that's just the sort of animals that we are, And I think, again, if you go and look at all the heroes that humanity has created or have been born out of humanity, whether it's Gilgamesh or Malcolm X or Mahatma Gandhi or Jesus Christ, they've always had difficulties convincing people. And in the end, they just walked away or, they were hurt or damaged by the masses. I think there are a couple of approaches you can take to all these difficulties that exist in life, society, various groups that are created. You look at someone, you pay attention to what they say, how they say it, you pay attention to the body language, and then if you have any wisdom you sit back and you say, okay, do I want to go back and forth with this person? If you're in the position of, say, greed, pride, lust, anger, there's a good chance that the both of you are going to wrestle until one of them says, okay, I give in. If on the other hand, you've been there, you've done that, you just don't want to waste your time anymore, you say, okay, I'm going to leave that person alone. I'm going to leave that person alone. They seem relatively okay. Let me go back and forth with that person for 10, 20 minutes, let's see where this is going to end up. And then you'll either continue or you just give up. I don't really know which version is best. Is it best to be like Jesus, somewhat passive? Or is it best to be like Moses, active? Socially, I mean. Anyone who picks up the sword shall perish by the sword. That's a very passive way of looking at social injustice. If you happen to be Moses, an eye for an eye. And it depends on a lot of different factors, whether you want to side on Jesus or whether you want to be on the side of Moses. Realistically speaking, this is just a simple classroom. We are simple, ordinary people, despite what we may think about ourselves. I don't have any power over various policies, over the government. This morning I was walking, I came here at 5 after a few hours of writing. I walked around campus. Man, this place looks like a dump. And I was inspired to write an email to the president saying, listen, just give me a budget. Just give me $1,000. I'll gather some students. We'll go to Home Depot. We'll get some paint, some, sandpaper, some brushes, and we'll slowly paint the doors, paint the rooms, make them look a little bit more presentable, that it kind of tells students, we like you a little bit, because when you walk around this campus, it really just makes you have all these negative thoughts and feelings about just the state of this place. It's run down. And they spend thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to kind of just keep this place going. And just look at it. It's awful. So, anyways. I can't really talk about the border issue because it involves a great amount of political knowledge, which I don't really have. Um, Let me give you an example. Mexico used to be a corn country. You know, that's how they made their money. They would plant a lot of corn, and then they would sell their corn to their number one customer, and that was the US. Behind closed doors now, they sit back and they say, if we can make a country poor, then we can use their bodies, human beings who live in that country, who are suffering from poverty, to migrate to America. And we can use their physical power to make America richer. So how can we do that? Well, you can't use anyone if they're rich. You can't use anyone because if you're rich, you're privileged, you're independent, you have sovereignty, you know, you have self-sufficiency, you're autonomous. But when, if for example, you had come to class every single day without missing it, and you had done all the assignments, you would never come to me and say, Amir, can I make up an assignment? That would never happen. But let's say for various life circumstances, you were not able to make class, and that creates its own unique poverty. So you come to me after like a month or 2 months of not being here, or 5 months, and say, Amir, listen, I need to pass this class. What do I need to do? And now in a state of poverty, you come begging for a solution because you don't want to fail, okay? So the first thing you need to understand is if you want to use people, exploit people, if you want to sell them something, you have to break them. Unless you are a really, really, really good, crafty, exciting, inspirational speaker. That someone may be a Christian, someone may be a Buddhist, but you know the history of Buddhism, Christianity so well that you can dismantle those ideas. And then you can inject into it Taoism. And all of a sudden the guy will say, forget Christianity, forget Islam, I want to be a Taoist. Sometimes you don't need to break people. You just need to kind of just open some doors, okay? Now, it's very rare for people not to break you, but only to open some doors where you yourself can see certain things and then gravitate towards those things willingly. Oftentimes, for anyone to be able to be sold anything, you have to put them in poverty. There was a guy named Henry Ford, if I'm not mistaken, I may be wrong about the name. He initially went into creating toasters, okay? And at a certain point, he made like 30,000 toasters. When you have a new invention, and people are not used to the invention, and the only way they toast their bread is they turn on the oven, for example, they wait for half hour, then they put the bread in. So they have a good amount of patience. And so Henry Ford has to figure out, how can I sell toasters to these people? Because it means that in order for you to sell toasters to someone, you have to change their habits. You have to change the way they think about toasting bread. And if that particular habit, turning on the oven, waiting for half hour, putting the bread in, waiting for another half hour, then taking it out, you have to change a tradition. Okay? So what do? You blitz them. You know how football, you have the offense or defense blitzing the quarterback. He doesn't have time to think. He doesn't have time to get the ball. He doesn't have the ball to pass, to look around to see who's available. And they began to blitz society. And what happens is all of a sudden people say to themselves, oh, why the hell would I want to spend like an hour waiting for my bread to be toasted? Let me buy the toaster. The problem with buying a toaster is the following. It's $29.95. That's how much it costs. How much do you make a month? $30. What do you now need to do to buy the toaster? Now, imagination comes into being. It means I don't have to turn on the oven. I don't have to wait for an hour. It means I can just put my bread in this toaster 2 minutes later. It's beautiful. Okay? I am willing to go in debt. I am willing to work an extra 40, 50, 60 hours. It's all the work of imagination do you see? And then you lust something you didn't have before. You may have lusted after buying a bed for your child, but now you lust after buying a toaster. Then depression hits. And it means that everybody's out of a job. Nobody has money to afford buying a toaster. And now Henry Ford sits back and says, I got 25,000 toasters on my hand. What the hell am I going to do? He looks at his own people, the people who work in the factory. He says, instead of $29.95, I'm willing to give my workers a deal, $15.95. And all of a sudden, he creates this poverty within the psyches of his own people. I say all of this for the following. Mexico used to be the grower of corn and then sell them to the US. US is a growing country. They need people to make this land look beautiful. Okay. What do? First, you create all these stories about the city on top of this hill. Your dreams will come true. Your hopes will come true. America is a beautiful land, and it is. It's a great many things, if you know how to use them. Then the politicians, American politicians, go to their own farmers, and they say, we know that you guys, do watermelon and oranges and pineapples and this and that. We're going to make you a deal. Instead of planting like lettuce, you guys plant corn. For every dollar you spend planting corn, we'll give you 80 cents. It means you only spend 20 cents out of your pocket. And then they say, we'll buy the corn. It's a good deal. So the American farmers begin to grow corn. Mexico can no longer sell its corn. Why? Because it's much cheaper. It's much cheaper now for Mexico to buy corn from America. So you have all this corn on your hand. You can't do much with them. They go bad. Now, Mexican farmers have no place to go. There are no jobs. What do? What happens when you have a boyfriend and you realize that your relationship with this boyfriend is nothing but poverty? He destroys his hopes, your hopes. He destroys your dreams. Your self-image goes down. Everything about your worth and value go down. And that's what poverty does. All of a sudden, you have no job. You wake up, there is nothing to do. You have this big piece of property, nothing to grow. And even if you were, who's going to buy it? It's all a risk. And now all of a sudden, what do? Hello. You come to America. Because they've made your country bankrupt. Iraq has perhaps the biggest oil reservoirs on the face of this planet. Iran. Why can't, their own people use the oil? Because now what you need to do to govern people, govern countries, is to create borders. And if you happen to be powerful, you can create and recreate these borders. It's like redistricting. If you're a Republican, for example, you get yourself to certain parts of Oakland that are, say, Democrats, and you divide them. And all of a sudden, Oakland becomes a Republican village, for example. All because you had the power to draw lines in a different way. Now, when you go back in history, you realize that in 1911, France, British, America, Germany, they come together and they chop up the world into these pieces, and then you govern them. You look at Japan's constitution. It's basically written by the US. And so when you ask, what can we do about the border control? There is a simple answer, which is, I don't know, talk to your senators, talk to your... And the bigger issue is politics is like education. It's a deeply flawed and deeply clogged up system. You can't do anything. I'm sorry?
Machiavelli.
You can read Machiavelli, she's right. You can read Machiavelli and learn that the only way to control anyone is to make sure that they fear you. Fear creates respect. But you want to make sure that they don't hate you, because hating someone means eventually you will revolt against them. See, if you fear me as your companion, if I tell you, can you make some food? You say, okay. Can you go to school? You say, okay. Can you do A, B, C, D? You say, okay. You will never in a million years think about having an affair, cheating on me, because you fear me. You know what I'm capable of. You don't want to do that. If on the other hand, you hate me, you will always look for a way to be out. You will always be happy when something bad happens to me. And remember, you fear me because, first, because I pay for your rent, I pay for your food, I pay for your clothes, I pay for your family this and family that. And you have every right to fear me because I pay every expense that you have. But Machiavelli is far too abstract for us today in the 21st century. You need something very realistic. I don't even know how that looks like anymore, to be honest. Things are really, really complicated. You know, there used to be a time where your father wasn't around simply because he had to work and because getting a job was tough. But now your father is never around because of work. When he is around, he's drunk because of just life is far too difficult. And now you all also see your mom and your dad fight all the time. And that's going to impact you. It's going to impact your child. It's going to impact the living situation. And then after a while you say, man, this is just too much. What the hell do I do? And the answer is, I don't know. If you have money, if you don't have money, save some money and just move out of Oakland. Go somewhere where there's calm and peace. It's just too much. And I'm not saying this to make anyone depressed, but I think it's good to look at things very, very realistically. You know, on YouTube, there are these videos about common people like you and I and police officers. I don't know what the program is called, but there are these people who are there to harass police officers. But let me tell you how they harass them. They just park their car and start walking. They flip them off, and the officer goes after them. And they know their laws really, really well. I mean, these common people. And the officer says, you just flipped me. My First Amendment right. Freedom of expression. What can you do? Get out of your car. No, code 12-958 says I can stay in the car. Get out of your car. No. Can I search your car? No, because of ABCD. And what it reveals really is that you can't get out of the car and you can't fight the cop. You'll end up in prison. The better thing you can do is turn on your camera on your phone, know your laws really, really well. You know? And that's one way you can do it. And I think it's not a bad idea for you to realize that society and most of its components are far, far too powerful for you to wrestle with. Do what you can to know your own space well. Look for the proper resources to combat the certain poverties that exist in your space, and then try to make your life better. If you can. The other thing you can do is find the right people, connections.